If you've spent any time with us at Remount in the arena or online here in a podcast, or have heard me present about the science behind our program, the Remount Method, then you have heard me mention Greg Kersten. Greg is the father of equine therapy, an originator of EGALA. Greg grew up in Nebraska, raising and showing quarter horses. His daily interactions with his horses and other farm animals reveal the natural herd versus pack behaviors and responses of the different species. What really intrigued Greg was how the animals' nonverbal communications compared to and even affected those of humans. These principles of animal behavior became the foundational elements of equine-assisted philosophy. Greg and his wife Jennifer founded the OK Corral and train and certify in EAP around the world. Greg, would you, and I know we've been through this with many, many trainings since 2009, and you've been a tremendous mentor to us, to the origination of Remount Foundation, Remount Method, and then what we've learned from you from trainings over the years. Would you give us a bit of the history? I know the history is decades of history.
Yeah, as I get older, because it's still continuing. But yeah, like you mentioned, born in Nebraska, and I, in a way, was thrown into this, and it was a blessing, that we had horses when we were just young kids. I have an older brother and sister, and my father passed away when I was 10. I'm the youngest one of the family there. And it was quite devastating because he was the primary breadwinner in the family. He was the one, doing everything, getting us all the horses and things. And so the next year or so, I went from my little grade school down the dirt road to a big inner city school. And you've heard this story before, so I'll try and make it short. And I didn't like that school very much. It was early 70s, and tie-dyed t-shirts and bell-bottom pants were the uniform of kids my age, except for myself. I wore a hat and boots to school quite a bit, and so I would skip school a lot. I'd actually ride the bus to school, run back home, and hide out with the horses. And that's where I got my first experience of like watching people and horses interactions, never asking questions because I was still hiding out from everybody. But the boarders were all training their own horses and things. And my mom, we had a saddle store out there. And so she stayed in the saddle store, and I got away with it for 63 days, and a lot of watching people, and they were good horse people, and what was unique about it is that we had quarter horses. We had Arab lady, we had saddlebred people, we had Appaloosa people boarding there, and it really was a great childhood. And even when they caught up with me, I used a lot of what I learned through keeping my mouth shut, and even the OK Corral actually stands for is observation and knowledge. I get goosebumps whenever I tell that story and talk about how I named it appropriately. You observe more and you will gain more knowledge. So, yeah. And so after that, believe it or not, I finally made it through school, and I made note of herds all throughout my life. A track team that I joined shortly after they caught up with me at that junior high school, football teams, and then the United States Army. And I was fortunate enough, and I think the Lord does look out for me for some reason. And I signed up to be a military police officer, and then I got orders right after military police school to go to dog school. And it's like, man, thank you. And I was sitting down to Central America and I re-upped just because I enjoyed so much of what I was doing. So I stayed at full almost 5 years down there. And Central America, full of drugs or whatever. And I am still friends with my my fellow dog handlers in the 3rd Infantry Brigade. And we still get together and talk about old times. And so I talk a lot about herds. And so with this pursuit, after I got out of the military, I didn't like college that much. And so I started working corrections. And it led me to working with youth programs. And then I discovered out west, I went all the way out to DC working in youth prisons and then down to Florida. And then I heard about out west, and where they're having all these youth ranches. And I eventually went out to Utah first. And I was always able to impress the psychology departments and the horse department, or the and educational departments, about how horses can be used for both, for history, education, animal husbandry, whatever. And then for psychology, it's like the horses bring up stuff, especially at one time I worked with celebrity kids that thought they were really smart because they were very rich, and the horses don't know anything about their wealth or fame or anything. That was probably the biggest discovery, is how well it worked on those kids. I was using it on inner city gang kids before that, right? And so yeah, I started working at a series, and one of the youth programs I worked at was just north of you, Emily Griffith Center, when it was up and running. And we'd have kids for over 3 years there, and they were from all over the United States. They weren't like local Colorado kids, and yeah, that was a big emphasis, to where I got a lot of accolades whenever I showed other psychologists what horses can do. And then I went back out to Utah to another youth ranch, and they told me, we want to center this program around what you're doing and things. And that's when I started my own company. Back then was Equine Services. And so I was doing weekend things for parents and their kids. Sometimes I'd trailer horses all the way out to California and, kind of borrow somebody's arena or whatever like that. And they're always wealthy people that could afford to bring me out there. And I'd work with their therapists. And because I'm not a licensed therapist, so I had always started working with therapists early on. And I think, talk about teams and stuff, as we mentioned earlier, that's a great team. Two heads are better than one. And so that became my emphasis, is like to have horse people work with therapists. And shortly after that, I left that last youth ranch. It was in Loa Utah. And I started EGALA back then. After Equine Services, I just turned it over to EGALA, and it was a nonprofit. And it started like gangbusters. You've heard the story, how well we did. Started with like 35 members. And by, 2005, we had 2,000 members, and we're making a pretty good amount of money just off the trainings alone. Yeah, it got good. I think I outgrew that nonprofit. They were always worried that I was going to leave them high and dried, so they got rid of me before I got rid of them. But it worked out great because I didn't miss a beat. I was already doing some work under the OK brands. And I love the story about the shootout at the OK Corral, and because it was one of the last true gunfights, and I talk about, even this work that I'm in, it is like a modern day gunfight, because you have people coming with all different morals, philosophies of life, different worships, and so, but when you get out there with that horse in an arena or pasture or whatever like that, you can't help but be in awe or be suspicious or curious or even a little bit afraid of that herd that's around there. And then even working up to, riding or doing anything like that, there's just so much you learn about yourself that, I know a lot of people are using dogs for stuff. And I know a lot of people I get calls from people starting up gardening therapy. And it's like, I'm sorry, guys, I can't help you that much with gardening. It's not I need something that moves. And that's why, I'm not a high tech person, as we know, setting this all up. Something about the horse and the equine psychology, behavior, it is so basic. Yeah. It almost teaches us to be more basic. And that way we're more strong when we're basic. Yeah. And so, yeah, we've been doing the OK Corral since 2005. And so I've been doing this a long time.
Yeah, 20 years now, it sounds like. You started with us in 2009, did our first training. So we've been doing this for 16 years. But looking at what you do felt like the right fit for us for quite a number of reasons. That we therapists couldn't get paid on the Air Force Academy doing equine work. So number of reasons. And it's worked out well for us as far as being able to evolve it into a peer mentor program with the horses.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's been very powerful for, as you said, you still get together with the guys that you served with, and
You bet.
that connection can be really strong between veterans. And so one thing that I remember that I've, had always been intrigued by, but now feel like, I have a grasp and understanding is like, even on your website, you'll say for trainings, no horse experience required. Can you tell me a little bit about that? Like what's behind that?
I think that's put out there more for like therapists, that are not familiar with horses, or they might have had horses when they're younger and kind of wanted to do something like this, but we're concerned about their skills. But the simple fact that we do like to team up a horse person with a therapist, and it works out great. And that way, the therapist, and in a way, even in the first day training or whatever, you might remember saying it. Sometimes horse people have more difficulty in the training because they're thinking about true horsemanship or showing and how you have to do this for this or whatever the latest horse clinician might have done. And so sometimes the non-horse people, therapists or whatever, actually are better at the work because they think more basically. And that's the stuff we cover in the seminars, is the basic motivation or movements of the horse, and I think that's why they've existed for all these centuries, because they're not high tech, they're not war creatures, they're not, and not that I'm saying that's all bad for humans, but we are pack animals, and we tend to learn from the horses. And I say this all the time too, almost every horse person has a dog, cats, or whatever like that. Those dogs become more herd-like than pack-like. Now they might bristle up when a strange dog comes around, or a coyote or something, but all in all, with the herd, their family, and all the horses, they become a herd member. And so I don't worry about people's experience with horses, because they're going to get some really good experiences from the seminars, and then later on, if they're involved with this type of work. And I think they're going to learn more, as opposed to horse people sometimes try to impress you with how much they know about horses. And that's, like I said, it gets in their way sometimes.
Yeah. I 100% agree with, through the years of doing this and watching that horsemanship background can get in the way. And I've also had volunteers who come to me and, and will say, this is such a different way of being with and looking at the horse. And I'm so grateful for it. I've learned so much from it. And I'll explain to people, this isn't horsemanship, but what you will end up learning is probably some of the truest horsemanship, honestly, is learning from the horse themselves, learning to watch. And I often say, horses really do teach us to be better people, to be better humans. I think you used to say something like horses teach better humanship or horsemanship or something like that. I don't remember, but
well, I think they do teach more herdsmanship,
Yes.
And again, that's what I use that, a lot more these days, because even like I said, after, in school and stuff, I look back now about all the herds that I was impressed with, even though it wasn't always like cowboy guys that, although I have a big herd of those back in Nebraska. It's the track team, where I was one of a few, white kids on the track team, but yet I was part of that herd, and horses have that. And, that's why a lot of the seminars, we start out with a herd of horses out there. We can go down to like just one horse, where the client's working with just the one horse or whatever like that. And that's EAP as well. But I like them, because the military, I wrote an article years ago about, basic training being herdsmanship 101. I learned that in the military. I didn't know it at the time. I cussed them out. I hated the drill sergeants, and I felt they hated me. But afterwards, we were a herd,
Yeah. Yes.
and it's like still bright. I still remember all my drill sergeants' names. Yeah, in Central America, I got to serve with one of them. He ended up coming back into regular duty after he wasn't in my platoon, but he was in my company. And he was mean. But once I got to know him as a regular guy, he was pretty cool guy.
Yeah. No, I mean, that is the whole point of that basic training, is teaching you to be a herd, teaching you to have each other's backs, to watch each other's perimeter and all of that. And that's something I've always striven for with with my team, is for us to be a herd, and our family, they call it. So we've covered the horsemanship stuff. That was one of the things that Brenda Nguyen sent me a chat. Anything else? The no experience required. It isn't horsemanship. Like I said, you've often said that. Actually, would you expand on that just a little? Because I love what you always say in training, that this is not horsemanship, because horsemanship is about us talking. This is therapy.
Well, another segment of EAP is the EAL, Equine-Assisted Learning. We use that terminology. Horsemanship is, I think people have it in their mind that they have to demonstrate that they know this, whereas learning is it's a new thing every day. Every time a client comes down to the horses, every time I go out to the horses, I learn something new. Right, this little paint mare got sunburned a couple of weeks ago. Right?
This is
I've been around horses my whole life. Like I mean, she's light skinned, white. A lot of her body's whiter, and it might have been plagued by food or something like that. I've had horses that have been sunburned on noses before. The whole body.
Wow.
Through it and I'm 64 years old. I've never had a horse that's sunburned like that, and she's 8 years old. So we've been a few summers with her,
Yeah.
And so the learning never stops for myself, as well as the clients, as well as anybody doing this work, And that's why I say I like this profession, because I'm helping other people out, but I'm learning too about myself still to this day.
Yes, absolutely. I'll tell my volunteer cadre, like after you, and sometimes I've done it when you are there training, but sometimes it's after, like you may be here walking alongside someone who is here to work through their trauma, but you're going to be learning, or you're going to find some aspects of healing right alongside of them. It's all of us. I'm always doing that too, in different situations with different warriors or family members. And so it is a continual learning process and growing process.
Absolutely.
A question that I get often, that I would ask you too, is what do you feel makes the EAP so powerful and different from the therapy in, say, in an office?
Well, there's a lot more to be observed, first off. And so I mentioned the observation, knowledge that a person gathers. Even at Remount there in Colorado Springs, it's outdoors, so you have interactions with all the, the workers around there, birds, bears. So, I mean, there's just so much to distract us just to make it a real life situation. And as well as the horses are there too. And they respond to the different things maybe differently than we do. And so, that's the biggest thing about it, is like there is just so much, to learn from in those sessions.
Right.
Sometimes it's created by something outside of the arena too. And so that's the greatest thing of all. Plus, it focuses on movement, not only the movement of the horses, but the movement of people too. Again, it is unlike me to sit down and talk to a computer. I think, well, I see a familiar face. But, the simple fact of movement is so powerful in a horse's life. I mean, it actually keeps them alive, keeps their blood pumping, as well as moving away from dangerous situations. So movement is key. And I feel a lot of times that with our computer stuff, high tech. I'm amazed that phones can do so much. I'm amazed I'm talking to you right now via computer things. But I'm not intrigued by that so much because I like the outdoors, the real life, and I always brag about the wild horses we have here in Nevada.
Mhm.
And, they're not any out here right now, but probably later today there will be. And no matter how bad I feel about whatever is happening, I see those wild horses out there, and I see my horses saying, I don't know if they're saying, I wish I were with them, because I don't think they would be able
Yeah.
to. They look forward to their good feed that I feed them. But it can change you to the better, knowing that they're taking care of themselves, and I get moving. If I'm feeling down about anything, I get moving these days
Yeah.
because that's what my horses do,
Yeah.
and all the horses I see around me. So movement and observation are some of my biggest things about
Yeah.
how people can heal and a lot of times heal themselves with a little help from the therapist, the horse professional, or just the horse itself. So, yeah.
Well, I agree. And I feel like over the years of watching this, and that combination of, like you said, movement, observation, gathering knowledge, that the people that provides a more holistic path for healing for people. We are meant to move too. We're not meant to just sit. We we were like horses and originally, moving, being nomadic, and still always meant to move. And we process things better often through moving as well. And so that's something I've watched over the years in doing this work is some aha moments for people when they felt it in their body. And now science is really, kind of medical and mental health science is really seeing the value of looking at this holistically. Trauma is held in our bodies. And if we don't move that and begin to understand that, we get stuck in.
And again, the horses are the greatest teachers, role models, whatever, because look at how many avenues in the history of, especially the United States, have horses come around to help us move from moving from one location to another, from helping us plant crops, helping
Mhm.
us deliver our mail. I mean, and now they're coming full circle to helping us out, getting us to move physically more and help our own mental health out the same way. And that's why I love it, especially when working with veterans. I want them to look at that because horses have been a part of almost every military since the beginning of time. So,
Exactly. And they're becoming a part once again. They
yes,
had in Afghanistan. So
whole
it's
recircle.
a whole new recircle. Exactly. That's I think for my team, we often say that that's really the most powerful metaphor in all of the metaphors. And there are many powerful metaphors, but we love the recircle. And even you've gotten to see some of our volunteers say, I can remember the Marine that said, when he was going through the training and you were there, and he said, this is what I've been doing this whole year. I've been recircling. And we're like, yep, that's what you've been doing. And so that is that power of watching the horses do that full recircle and applying it to it, really cognitively applying it to our own lives. I do love that one. Oh, when we've talked about this, there are more entities choosing OK Corral now for their training method. What are your thoughts there? I mean, what are people looking for that's different?
Well, I think they have the notion because I've pretty much trained most of the other organizations that are doing some form of EAP or whatever like. And
Uh-huh.
so everybody, I'm a capitalist. I mean, I love America. I'm a capitalist. I think it's fine. I never felt threatened or whatever like that. If you think you can build a better mousetrap, go ahead. Right. Not that I think I trap anybody in this work. I think it's the other way. I let people come and go if they want to stay doing this or whatever. And um, they, I think sometimes they feel that it needs to be more regimented, and
Uh-huh.
it's even like when I parted ways with Egala, that I don't know how anybody can't feel smothered by the intrusion, the cost, the time that you have to spend doing all of their trainings, and you have to do it this way all the time. And that's not therapy, and that's not horsemanship. There's not a set standard on doing anything or a set system at all. You got to be able to do a recircle here and there, or, go towards or go away from it, if the situation feels that way for whoever's conducting the session. So a lot of them think that it should be more regimented or should be more regulated and done this way, or you can't be really doing it. And that's not the way. And I think they come back realizing, yeah, I mean, you guys, I always tell people you can do exercises differently if you want to, or whatever like that. This has been my preferred way over the years. I get the best results from it, or whatever like that. And so there's people come back, haven't seen them or heard from them for 10 years. And they come back, I just need a new refresher or something like that. And to me, it says they need to get back to the basics, and that's what so many other people doing this. They try to take them too far out on some other limb that they think is better, and it doesn't work for them.
Right. Yeah. I've always appreciated that you encourage people to take this and make it your own. This is the basic philosophy. And to have that ability not to put things in small boxes, which human beings have this tendency to do, and horses really don't. And so being able to have that flexibility and grow, and you've talked about feeling like God always kind of directed your path, and I really felt like that for Remount, that it's unfolded in the way that it has been meant to unfold, and that we learned from you and learned from how things came about and grew. So Brendan was asking me to ask if you would, he's probably like, Jeanne, you could stop, don't forget to look at the chats. And can Greg describe how horses sense human behavior, visual attention, things like that?
Yeah. Again, I go back to the basics as far as they do observe it, but they also, it's not just the sight part of it. They smell, they can feel different pressures by the way a person responds. If they use their hands a lot or whatever like that. And you probably heard me talk about people that are kind of somewhat aggressive or whatever, even if they don't physically hurt people, but they tend to get closer to them when they talk. That would send a horse to probably move it away a little bit, to take a few steps back. But guess what? Same thing they do to humans. They just notice it more when a horse does it than when a human does it, right? And so they use the sense of smell. They use their hearing a lot of times too. So even like, people like, kids or whatever have used an F word in the arena, and the horses, look at them right away. It's not the F word itself. It's how they say it. It's loud and directed at someone, which causes a pressure, which horses move away from that pressure. And so they don't really hear our words, they feel our words.
Right.
And some of the stuff that we do actually, would be painful to the horse, which would cause them to nip back, because horses move into the pain and they move away from the pressure. And just those basic things right there are how horses interpret us a little bit. And even you've heard me talk story before my dad died. I was the youngest. Whenever people come to buy horses, I always showed the horses off, right? Because I was real little, I was 6, 7, 8 years old, and I was found my way to get on the horse, everything like that. Horses, when they look, adult full size horses, when they look at a regular thing, they see a whole child's body. Nothing I do ever spooked them or anything like that. But if my dad or my older brother, who was very big, but they would look at him more like around the waist or whatever like that. So hand movements would surprise them a lot more. People always said, even my neighbor, she always wanted me to train her kids' horses all the time. Well, Greg, you just get along so well with horses. You could do it too if you just kneel down more or something, so you're not surprising the horse,
Yeah.
And so all these little things go that I think can be used to help understand how the horses view us and what they think about us and how it might go a different direction. But the same way as with people too. We don't have the fantastic observation skills that horses do because they have monocular vision, meaning they see out of both eyes and can see independently, even where we have binocular vision, where we see out of both eyes and we see one picture, right?
Right.
And so we're kind of limited in our peripheral awareness. And so horses win hands down on being able to peripherally see what's around them much better than we can, especially if we complicate our lives with handheld devices in our faces all the time, which you're not supposed to do when you're driving, right? Which is obvious.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. We've come to a place where we do a lot of things that are really not very natural, not very, and they move us away from herd mentality and observation and knowledge, observation and movement.
That artificial intelligence bothers me. I'm not scared, but it bothers me.
It does me too.
I think me skipping school and watching those horses day in and day out, interacting with their respective people, I learned so much. I gained so much intelligence about basic living, and it still holds true this day. And that's what, no matter what brings the client to therapy or whatever, young or old, male or female, they can all get that same experience, and it's not artificial. It's real.
It's real. It's something, particularly when I've worked with some young, with many warriors, like younger. I remember a 16-year-old boy I worked with, and he was 20 a year ago. I went to his wedding, my husband and I did, but when he was about, I don't know, he came back to visit me and brought the young woman who ended up being his wife, but he would just to listen to him tell her about the things that he had learned from the horses was just really heartwarming, that they'd really changed him, and he still applies what he learned now in his life going forward. And I think many, many people that have seen that would say the same thing. So Brendan had said here, so Greg doesn't think artificial intelligence can replace the horse therapist. I would think not. Yeah. But he would love for you to describe the recircle in your words.
Yeah, well, again, it's probably one of the most powerful things that I've observed, especially in wild horses. Even though our domesticated horses, as we've seen many times at Remount there, domesticated horses do a recircle as well, whether they're in pasture, whether they're in the arena. So, but what it is basically, and I really probably prefer my story. Is that all right?
Fine. Your story is, I share your story to a certain extent too, because it's a great demo.
That too is one of the things I think is a lost art is, cowboy poetry is still wrong. Before the poetry, it was stories. Cowboys and cowgirls would sit around a campfire on camp drives and tell stories that then turned into more of a poetry thing. But yeah, it was out here in Nevada, and I always felt safer when I was out, rounding or trying to find the herds and stuff like that. And I always have binoculars in my case, my saddle, and I carried a weapon just in case things get out of hand. And never with a horse, is more bear or mountain lion or something like that. And so I was always, and I tried to carry a camera, but at that time, nice cameras were bulky and some rough terrain. So a lot of times I didn't bring the camera with me, and so I didn't have the camera with me that time. And I rode one of my stallions, a two-eyed Jack stallion. Jack is what we call him, because he's tough. I mean, I've got several stallions, and he's ended up with them even when he was younger. He whoops the hell out of any other horse, And so I always felt safer on Jack because he's so observant. He's got the biggest gold eyes in the world, and every female that's come down to whether they're breed to one style or the other sees his big, beautiful eyes. And they choose Jack because he's, but he's also athletic and all these great things. And so I'm riding out with them, with a place where I see a lot of them, because in this little valley, there's a little bit more vegetation for being in Nevada, because a good runoff from rain or whatever like that. So it settles down there and there's more to choose from there. And so I go up there and there the herd was. I see them there all the time. And, the amount of babies. And what's neat here in Nevada and a lot of these areas, BLM does sterilize stallions and mares a lot of times because they feel the herds are getting overdone. But where I'm at now, everything, the Paiute reservation controls those horses, and they don't let the BLM sterilize them. So they had babies in those herds, which you don't see in a lot of herds. And so I saw the babies, and I wish I had my camera or whatever like that. And they're grazing, and the babies are laying down and stuff. Just beautiful sight, and Jack was just happy looking at him and stuff like that. Next thing you know, one little stallion, or it might have been a mare, I think. Mare I couldn't see except with my binoculars. I kind of know this herd pretty well. It's about 15, 11 horses strong all the time. And they mare started moving, and the young stallion started moving with her, and all the babies were getting up and moving with the herd, right? And it's like, what's going on? So I'm looking through binoculars, and by this time, the whole herd, 15 or so of them, are moving away from them just at a walk, which is another thing. A lot of times people think, oh, they run from them. And so I've never seen wild horses run from anything. I tried to get them to run away from my haystack one day. I got more winded than they did, but the babies were trotting to keep up with their moms, but their moms were walking and, pretty speedy walk. And look at their binoculars, and there I see about three wolves. There could have been more, but they're in the brush there, and I couldn't see them well, but two of them I could see real well because they're in the short grassy area, and big beautiful wolves. It's like you don't get to see a lot of wolves, you see a lot of coyotes, and they are scraggly looking compared to wolves. And so I was amazed by that, and the herd just keeps on moving away from them, and the little pack of wolves stop and just watch them, and the herd gets about 50 to 70 yards away from where the wolves have stopped, right? They stop, right? And so I go back to what they were doing there was they were moving away from pressure. They didn't know what it was for sure. The first mare saw it, and she started moving away because it was pressure to her. And then the other horses probably just followed suit with the other horses moving forward because they're a herd. They didn't stop and look behind them, or they trusted whatever somebody else saw, and they kept on moving, right? Even the lead stallion kept moving with them, right? So because they stopped about 50 to 70 yards away from where those wolves were, and they were just sitting there, the herd stopped, and the lead stallion did turn around and look back to where they were. The rest of the herd was checking, the mamas were checking their babies, checking in with the older horses or stuff like that. And then they also were looking around the area, that valley, not just at the wolves the whole time. The lead stallion, never really took his eyes off of that pack of wolves there. And so what I've termed when the people, horses, whatever, are moving away from the pressure, that pressure stops at some time. They don't feel the same pressure anymore. So that area to me is a safe place. All right. So those horses didn't feel the same pressure they felt early on. So they stopped where they were, and they're looking around for other avenues of retreat if it still is a threat. Vegetation, water, path, whatever. Could be shade a lot of times, because they do use shade trees if they can find them in Nevada. And so as I'm watching them and doing all the things, pretty soon I see that lead stallion come out, and he's got two other stallions with him. I know the herd pretty well, so I definitely know the lead stallion by sight. And they start going not directly, kind of in a arcing circle back towards the wolves, right? And it's funny because the wolves' ears are really up now, and they're almost like cocking their head in like a Disney movie, like, what are they doing, And it's funny because a lot of people have never seen a horse really mad to when their ears are really pinned back, and you can see their eyes wrinkling up. I could see that in the binoculars a little bit, and they lowered their heads like they were going in like missiles to those wolves that were smaller than they were, ears back or whatever like that. They got within probably 20 feet of those one or two wolves that was out in the clearing there. Those wolves, as big and beautiful as they were, turned around, tails tucked between their legs, and they took off and they ran. Okay. So from that safe place that the horses were at, everybody's taken care of. All these resources that they might need later on were discovered. Then the three horses, not the whole herd, only three horses went out there, and then they went towards their pain. Who are you, stupid little pack animals? Who do you think you are, trying to hurt and ruin our lives or whatever like that? And they went towards them in the arcing circle, because it is a true circle that wild horses do. Our horses are limited at times because they're in pastures that have different shapes to them or whatever. But it was a good recircle, and they got close to them and they took off. Right. And so I'm watching the stallions the whole time. And so when they get back to that safe place where the rest of the herd was, by that time, the babies were laying back down. The older horses were grazing like nothing had happened. And again, I get goosebumps telling the story because it was so amazing. Studied it a little bit, heard about it, but that's the first time I'd ever seen it just so live that it could have been a real life-threatening situation, not just a paper bag blowing across the prairie. And man, and so that's when I said right there, I said, this is what we have to do as humans, because we're kind of pack animals. We have to learn. Pack animals have a recircle as well, but it is to attack, right? And those stallions, if I have to attack, they would have attacked, but they prefer to get them to move away from their pressure, right? And then they come back to their herd and everybody's okay, right? And so that's what recircle is. And through exercises, as you well know, we help our clients learn to take a step back, to move away from pressure. You know, it's not a wimp thing. It's not you're giving up. You're not surrendering. Even in the military, they teach you how to retreat, you know. So if anything, think of it as a retreat method in order to get ammunition or more fighting sources or whatever like that. And so it's a great way to get things under control. Now that little recircle lasted for like 15 minutes, maybe. I was amazed how fast it went. But our recircles a lot of times may take longer than that. Therapy might be a part of our recircle, you know, and all the time getting us to gather our resources. And that's the big thing. Captain Kirk says it in Star Trek. Resources, or he calls it alternatives, but I call it resources.
Yeah. No, I that's one of my favorite stories. We have a lot of stories that I really enjoy, but that's one of my favorites, and I share that one sometimes when we do talk about the recircle.
Well, with that, even though it's a story, they will see it then themselves in a session or in a real life situation. Yes. You know, with riots, with different things that are going on in our country today. How can we change this around? You know, and I still remember riot control training in the Army. They kept it basic, and that's why I still love, you know, things that I learned in the Army too. The riot control, you know, what your total goal is to get the rioters moving. It's not to apprehend them. It's not to hurt them. It's to show such a sign of force that they're intimidated, that they move, that they go away from whatever, you know, and they end up dispersing, you know, and it's keeping it basic again.
I never knew that, but that makes sense. And that was exactly what the stallions did at that point. Yeah. All right. So Brendan sent another message here. Are there other trends in human behaviors that could be or is conflicting with horses' interpretation of behavior? And said you mentioned phones, not dangerous, but impacts the interpretation as not natural. Yeah.
Right. So because Greg mentioned that you know, the phone being held up in front of the face, right, and then them approaching a horse, that's not natural. You know, so it's are there other things that you're seeing that's happening in human behaviors today that's impacting how the horse interprets what's going on?
Well, that would be a big one right there. And it could be a little bit about maybe it's more, men are more guilty of it, especially it could be a military thing too, as far as moving forward, that's a sign of strength. So if anything delays that or gets you to stop, or heaven forbid, take a few steps back, like what I promote in a recircle, so you can better visually see what's really happening out there, or whatever like that. So sometimes we get in this idea that, running towards something, and I donate to Tunnel to Towers, and we've known some people that come down there when I'm doing my training or whatever like that, that have said, oh yeah, we owe the fire department, the police, the military, because they run towards danger when the rest of us are running away. I kind of get mad about that description, because what you're saying is, and I know, with my dog and stuff like that, I was trained to go towards whatever it was. I was not afraid, but I was trained to do that. That's part of my life recircle, is learning how to do that. I wouldn't go to a fire. I would run from a fire because I don't know how to handle it, especially in a building or anything like that. So in a way, with that description, like, we are weak humans and only firemen or police officers or whatever like that go towards the danger. You don't want everyday civilians going towards the danger, because they're going to get killed, they're going to get hurt. So we are doing what we should be doing, moving away from the pressure of a fire, of an incident, or whatever it is. Move away from it. Let those that are trained by their former recircles, education, military, whatever, to go towards it appropriately, to go towards that pain appropriately. That's what it's about. So that's what I think, especially because I've talked about working with law enforcement officers. I see it more law enforcement than former veterans, that they want to make a big statement to the horse, and the horses more naturally, with that individual being aggressive, will move away from it. And then it's like they'll sit down and say, oh yeah, I showed that horse, right? Well, not all horses are the same. And you've heard stories about my horses that they will come towards their pain in a heartbeat. And then, it's a good learning opportunity, but I think they do that to people too. Well, I'm law enforcement, well, I'm a veteran, or whatever like that. Well, you're not learning enough about herd movement, And so that is, it's not AI or anything. It is something that I think society sometimes is trying to tell us. And that's why, I donate money to them. I'm kind of writing a letter to the head honcho guy. I want to tell him about this recircle, because so many commercials talk about, well, everybody's running away from the danger and they're running towards it, because that's the way it should be.
They were trained to do that. They have resources. Yeah.
They've done recircles to develop this skill to put things out.
They've done the exercises and the training. But I liked what you said about, you spent your life kind of recircling about that. And, it makes me think of, the warriors I've worked with who, turned around and punched someone in Walmart because they moved back into, and that's what they've been trained to do. And now they're trying to figure out when is appropriate to do that, but when and how they can move away to a safe space, rethink things. And
that's why, again, I did learn a lot from basic training. They're teaching you to recircle, and they don't even know it, right? And even like, it is such a pack animal to continuously go into danger. That's why those wolves, they hesitated. It's like, those horses are walking away from me. Now they've stopped. Now they're coming towards me, right? And the horses were herd animals, but those pack animals said, I've never seen it, put pressure on them like they've never felt before. And they took off, and they didn't see a good, clear way. And that's why, coyotes, wolves, mountain lions, stuff like that, they will always go for the smallest, the weakest, or whatever like that. So that's pack animal. But in the military, they teach you how to move forward as a herd, not, even though I'm on the committee or whatever to try to get Audie Murphy
right
to the
into the Quarter Horse Hall of Fame.
Right. AQHA Hall of Fame there. And even though was the most decorated soldier in military history, right? And he did a lot of individual stuff, but it was because he had to, he had to he was a good shot. He had skills that, plus a lot of his troops were already injured, that he had to do something. And so it was more of an individual thing. But I have horses that come up and do something on their own that protects the herd. It might be a plastic bag, but my horses love to chase coyotes. Not all of them, but
some of them do. Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
It's a good thing to have that knowledge that it's okay to take a step back.
Yes.
It's not the only manly heroic thing to do, is to step forward or, what nothing. I don't think I've seen you since this thing, but spawned a article about heroics, right? Is it okay if I tell a story?
Absolutely.
It has nothing to do with horses or anything like that. I'm going to the VA, right? I don't know what it was, foot problem or something like that. So I'm limping over there and I'm walking by where one of the mobile services for veterans pulls up. They all park there, right? And let the veterans out, and then they drive off. Well, this one guy's in this van and he's in the driver's or passenger seat. And so he's right by the curb there. And I see him kind of trying to get out and he's falling and he puts his arm on through the window. So the door's holding him up. And he's like going to fall backwards, right? And I saw a person, like a nurse, she's wearing a uniform. She glanced over there, but she kept on walking, and I said, well, and so I'm, not 100% myself, I'm wearing my hat and boots because it's my regular uniform.
Right.
It's like, nobody's helping this guy. So I go up there, do you need some help or whatever? Like, I'm going to fall. And so, his armpits and shoulders are right there. So I put my arms underneath him or whatever like that. And at the same time, I'm kind of like pulling him out and his legs aren't moving very well. And I see a wheelchair behind the driver, right? And so I'm saying, is that your wheelchair? No, I don't have a wheelchair. And it's like, why isn't the driver helping? Come to find out, that was his wheelchair, the driver's wheelchair. So he doesn't get out. This guy had a walker in the back and he probably thought he could get out without the walker, but he couldn't get his legs to move. And so I pulled him out or whatever like that. And so I'm focused. I'm holding on to him. I'm opening up the back door and get the walker out for him and everything's fine. I don't know if he said thank you or not, but I was bombarded by mainly female nurses saying, thank you. You're like a hero. I go, what? My appointment is kind of what I started to think, which is, selfish and all that kind of stuff, But I thought about the whole rest of the day. I told the doctor about it, right? Because it wasn't a book that I was reading, talked about heroism is more doing basic stuff that you should do more so than, Audie Murphy's, saving his whole platoon or whatever like that. I should have done that. I didn't see anybody else around to do it. The one nurse walked by. I was worried that I might hurt him because I don't know his ailments or anything like that. But it's like, I know he's going to fall head first if somebody's not there to catch him. And those ladies were saying, I'm so glad you were there. I don't think I could have held him or whatever like that. But they did say hero a couple times, right? And like I said, that veteran didn't say thanks. I don't know. I'm on my way. But I still think about that. I wrote an article about, even like combined with the book or whatever. It was something basic. It was something basic that I really didn't have to. I could have just sped up and kept on walking. There's nobody else here to help out. I got to do something else. I would have thought bad thoughts about myself the rest of the day, probably. But and that's why, in a way, through the exercises that we do with EAP, even like trying to get a horse to maybe go over a difficult obstacle, just to walk over it or something like that. The stuff the clients find, young or old, resources that they use, whatever like that, might be metaphors, might be regular things that they could find in their own life to be their own hero, to be a hero. And I still think of myself after they get, what? I need to do more things like that, or basic. I should do this, even though it's going to take longer time. I should do this. Biggest thing is, since we live so far out, I should stop before I come back home and fill the vehicle up with gas.
You should do that. Yes, that's right.
Especially if my my gas pumps, because we do have gas pumps out here just in case we have
Uh-huh.
tractors and things like that, but I don't want to use that all up. So, yeah.
Right.
But doing things that we should do is heroic. And that's
Well,
why anybody in mental health needs to start thinking more about maybe being heroic and not being the, famous person that's going to solve a shooting or something like that, but, helping people across the street, picking up something for somebody that is in a wheelchair or whatever like that. I ask permission first because I also have a friend that gets mad at me when I do things for him in his wheelchair. So,
yeah. Yeah. So that's right. But, thinking what goes along with that is actually observation. I mean, to observe what's going on so that you are aware and will see situations where you might, like that nurse that walked by, maybe that nurse wasn't paying any attention.
Absolutely. They unload there all the time. Yeah. So, and, yeah. And that's what I always think about my horses being heroes, because they will do things out of the ordinary. It's like, how'd you think of that? And it's like, it's like something they should have done, and he went and had done it, sacrificed his own well-being or whatever, like in order for a younger horse, a mare or something like that. And I said, that's kind of cool. So,
yeah, that is cool. It's cool. Or even the story that you tell about your little mare trying to follow a stallion from the wilds, from the Mustang herd.
She chases them away now. She wanted to join up with him because she loves to have babies, I guess. And what, again, that stallion, we knew him very well too. And he just had two mares in his little herd, so just the three of them. And that gray mare got out, and I didn't even know it. And next thing you know, she's following that stallion up the mountain, hauling for Jennifer, my wife. Like, we got to get Rosie. She's following. We called the stallion AP, as an Appaloosa. And he'd turn around and he'd bite her pretty good. And she'd do a little recircle. And then when he turned around and started walking up, she got right behind him again. And then and so it's a pretty steep hill, and so Jennifer and I are huffing and puffing to get up there. And finally he got really mad and he turned around, bit at her. She got moved away. Then he started kicking her, right? And then she really moved back away. And then Jennifer was able to get up there. She was ahead of me and put a lead rope around her neck. And it's almost like that stallion knew, okay, they got her now. That's your herd. And several times I've been riding horses, or whatever like that, and I've seen that stallion or some others that have come around, and they don't mess with us at all. They move away from us or whatever, and they know the difference. It's like, that's your herd. Of course, at one time I had one stallion at one end of our place and the other one on the other, just because I didn't want them to get by around each other. But those wild horses love to sleep in between my two stallions. I went down there as an all bachelor herd, all stallions, some younger than others. That AP was in charge of that herd for a long time until he got his mares. And all five stallions were laying down. I walked out my door. I thought somebody shot all these horses or poisoned them because they're just all laying down. And it's like, what? But they're and my two stallions were looking out over their corrals, kind of watching that herd. And so our herd was like just another herd that they would interact with at times. They'd play over fences with each other. So,
yeah. That's neat that you got to see those things. Brendan has another question here. Says, why does EAP work? So why does equine-assisted philosophy work?
Kind of to go back to, it has movement, it has opportunities for crisis, which could be a pressure or a pain to an individual. Each one of us has different thresholds for a pressure and when it turns into pain. So that's why it's complete with the unknown, unfamiliarity that goes on. A lot of times the crisis that we feel is because we're unfamiliar. I mean, I'm in a big city. That's why I don't go to Denver anymore when I come to you guys. Fly into the Springs and come north, because I get traumatized by traffic. I'm a country boy, and at 25 is terrible.
Yeah.
But but it has some of those uncomfortable feelings, whatever, that we can have a chance to stop and say, hey, wait a minute. And I have done that, even though I have a GPS and it's telling me the right way, sometimes the wrong way to go. Sometimes I just pull over, and get my bearings straight, and let people say, oh, you're a sissy or whatever. I don't mind being a sissy because it's going to save my life by getting my mind set straight. EAP has all those things. Whereas, any type of office type therapy, you're always relying on the client to regurgitate incidents or feelings or whatever like that. Whereas in EAP, all those things that we talked about, plus you see it, you're observing it and gathering knowledge about your clients' fears, but also celebrations, because you see sometimes a smile on that client's face. And I don't need to hear. That's why a lot of therapists, you've seen them, they want to talk the death out of a client at the end of a session. Well, what did you like best? Or what did you get out of this? I don't care. I saw what I needed to see. I'll talk to the therapist, whatever like that. What did he or she see or whatever? And that is huge, to be able to be aware and how they walk even out of there. You don't get that in the office. I mean, they're going to the door, they shut the door. You don't see them anymore until a week later or something like that. Whereas you tend to walk out to a parking lot, meet their family, parents, anything like that. And it's just more of a natural, observation, movement, recircling when you get a chance. So you just don't get that chance in the office environment.
Setting. And I've had quite a few warriors that would say, for decades, they'd done hospitalizations, they'd done all kinds of things. And they said, I realized when it got right down to it, I would bullshit my therapist, would tell, I would get, and then we'd get to a certain place and then I'd leave. But, I came here and I can't bullshit the horses. Like they call me on it. No. And so they realize very quickly that they need to just be who they are. But this is all accomplished with movement and challenges and how they handle those and how they recircle. And so, yeah.
And again, it's not, just the horses confronting like aggressive males or, any type of aggressive behavior. It's not just males these days, but it's also under assertive people, letting that horse walk all over you or the horse just ignoring you. And it gets the client so upset that I can't get this horse to do anything. And then you start getting them to recircle and understand what are you afraid? Well, I don't want to hurt his feelings. I don't want to make him mad at me or anything like that. So that's keeping them, they're suppressing any of their real feelings of being a little bit more energetic or assertive, not aggressive, assertive. I think I could write a book about that, as far as, and it's not just females. A lot of them were females that the EAP really helped out, but there's some males too that just were afraid because I don't want to make the horse mad, or I don't want to make anybody else mad, or I don't want to embarrass myself.
So I've seen the exact same thing over all these years, and it's and for people to be able to learn, like you said, to bring their energy out and be assertive, and that I did have one young woman actually who, when we were kind of working stop and go before we were going to lunch, and she said, I feel like a bully, and I said, so what's the difference between being assertive and aggressive? And she kind of blew me away because she looked at me and she goes, well, there is no difference. And I said, let's think about that for a minute. And then she was quiet for a minute or two. And then she said, I can be assertive with children. But she said, my mother was always aggressive. So it was very interesting to watch her because she did have a difficult time being assertive with adults without being aggressive. So working with the horses, we probably worked the lunge for like 5-6 weeks.
You bet.
Very interesting.
Yeah. That's why EAP encapsulate, and that's why going back to other people that are doing this, a lot of times they have it like structured. You do this the first session, this the second, then they do this, and only until they do this, then you do that. Right. I trust people that are there, because they're observing their knowledge too. We may do something else. We may even come up with our own little exercise to do next week because of what we saw this week, right? And so that's why this is live. It's like the difference between watching a live rodeo and a taped rodeo. It's like, exactly. It's not the same. A football game, it's like I want it to be live,
Right.
So, yeah.
Responsive, exactly, which is just exactly what a horse is.
Because it's more truthful,
Mhm.
you're seeing it yourself right now. And that's why, yeah, therapy like this is perfect for you because you can do it as facilitators of this work. We do recircles all the time. We take a step
Absolutely.
back, talk to one another. What else could we do here in the
Yeah.
time remaining in the arena, pasture? And we can think for ourselves and implement it right there on the spot, or we can decide to wait till next week or whatever. So,
Right.
and to have it like structured so much, I don't think that's mentally healthy, emotionally
Yeah,
healthy.
I agree with you. It doesn't allow things to unfold in a very natural way. And so being able to be flexible and not as structured, I think, is very important. Being there, you're there for the person and being able to let it unfold in the way that they need it to unfold.
You bet.
Brendan has here toolkit for the person. Well, yeah, but I go ahead.
Greg, you mentioned earlier that that we too many other entities like like in Agala, it's regimented, it's set up, it's very structured. Where we try to Jeanne takes the approach from a remount method is like what you have suggested with OK Corral. I said make the toolkit fit the person, fit the situation.
Sure.
Use the tools you need. Don't force them upon somebody. It's not the person for the toolkit. It's the toolkit for the person.
And again, with the recircle, that's how you can see other tools actually will fit better than what was prescribed originally from some other organization or from a book you read, or even horse clinicians. I haven't been to see a horse clinician in years, but I know several of them, like Jeanne knows. And it's like I take what they say with a grain of salt too, because they have a lot of prescriptions that will say you need to do this. And so I do my research. I take a step back and I said, you know what? I think it might be better if I try this instead. So that's why you don't have to have a whole lot of tools in your toolbox. You know that you can take a step back and use resources that are already here and fix something. So yeah, you bet. And it's huge. I mean, it was popular for the horse world to, well, you got to release that pressure. You got to release that pressure. But they're talking a lot of times, training methods, with bits or whatever tools they're using to kind of restrain the horse in some way and releasing pressure as a reward or whatever like that. But just backing off, even like I don't ask that many questions at the end of a therapy session or whatever like that. I don't want the therapist to do it either. That's releasing that pressure, and you have that ability no matter what tool you're using. So yeah.
Yeah. And sometimes that pressure is the person themselves is trying to work. They're the one then that steps back and thinks through things. And many, many times I've had warriors say, actually think more about this after I've left, process it more after I've left. And I'd rather me not direct the processing,
because that's their recircle.
That's their recircle.
When they get to a safe place, they start looking around. What was this day all about?
Am I taken away from this? Exactly. Yeah, no, that's very true. I do think people do end up assimilating a toolkit kind of for themselves as they've been through that. Very often they'll find greater emotional regulation, having been with the horses and the horses telling them, look, there's something going on inside of you. So I don't really want to be that close to you. But then they learned that Marine that was there for one of the trainings. And he talked about that. He used to come early. He would, came to us highly suicidal. He told you his story, told the group his story, but his feet would hit the ground in the morning getting out of bed, and he'd come directly out to the barn before he'd had coffee or anything, pull his clothes on and come out to the barn. And he would say that he would round that stone building, toward that mare paddock. And he said if everybody's ears pinned flat back, then he knew that nobody really, they were going to walk away. And he said, but he would have gotten up telling himself that this is going to be a good day. But they were telling him that you got some stuff going on. And he said he'd go back around to the courtyard area and do battle breathing and then kind of think a bit. And then he said, if he'd go back around and the mare's ears would flick and not all go flat back, he knew somebody would let him pet them. And so a lot of our warriors do say they find emotion, they learn about the recircle. They find a way to self-regulate better. And so I do think a lot of our warriors go away with a little bit more tools in their toolbox for living in the civilian culture and society.
Yeah. And look how basic those tools are, because we really don't have to carry a bag, which would be baggage, with us in order to handle those situations. We have everything we need here, seeing that.
In fact, we're letting go of baggage when we incorporate these tools.
Keeping it simple.
Yeah, keep it simple. I love that. You always say that. Keep it simple. That's right. The old keep it simple, stupid, right? So, Brendan,
Great.
Any more questions? Go ahead.
Oh, this has been fantastic. Thank you, Greg. This has been fantastic.
Oh, you bet.
And I'm sure we'll come up with more questions as we get into the edit. I forgot to ask you this, but we hopefully can look forward to additional sessions with you in the future. That this has been great. We've had fantastic stories, and that you and Jeanne are what I consider the experts in the field. And
well, I'm not
the founder.
just the expert.
We greatly appreciate your time, and thank you so much for doing this. It's
Yes,
very
very
important to
much
me. So.
And thanks for sharing stories. I always love the stories.
Oh yes, love the stories. Love the stories.